In 1938, Adolf Hitler seized what legend said was history's most powerful weapon.
If you hold it, you're invincible.
It was said to be the spear which pierced the side of Christ.
Military leaders became almost besotted with the idea of possessing it.
And with the spear in his grasp, Hitler unleashed terror upon the world. But in the chaos of war, this most valuable of Europe's treasures simply vanished.
This was an emblem of war, twisted by the Nazis to become symbols of the Third Reich.
But one man, Walter Horn, would uncover the mystery of what had happened to the Spear of Destiny. And one of America's finest generals, obsessed with the spear, would launch a mission to find it. In 1933, Adolf Hitler is elected Chancellor of Germany.
Hitler was by no means a normal person to be leading a country in the middle of Europe in the middle of the 20th century, and especially one the size of Germany. He was a very embittered, lonely, twisted, abnormal individual who had an enormous amount of drive and this famous will to power. And that's what really, spurred him on.
He is desperate to be the all-powerful leader of the German people and create a new Germanic empire. The trouble is, he had won less than half of the popular vote.
His grip on power was nothing like as strong as many people think. I mean, after all, most people hadn't voted for Hitler.
The country is divided, and to realize his dreams, he will need to unite it.
Germany was, until just a few years before, in real terms, just a collection of very, very small states. You've got people in, all up near the Danish border, and you've got people all the way down near Munich and as far east into what would now be part of Poland. So how do you unify these people?
Hitler encourages the Germans to look to what he says is their past. He wants to portray himself as a man who will restore Germany to a time when it ruled Europe. And he wants to extend its borders to those of the greatest German empire in history, the Holy Roman Empire. The Holy Roman Empire was first created by Charlemagne, Charles the Great, the Germanic king of the Franks in 800 AD. Its purpose? To spread Christianity through all of Europe. For 1,000 years it dominated the continent. At its height, stretching from the North Sea to the Mediterranean, and ruling over what is now Germany and much of Austria, Poland, Italy, and France. Now Hitler wanted to create an even greater empire in his own image. The 1,000-year Nazi Reich with himself at its head.
He wasn't the type of person who would like to cut deals and engage in the art of statesmanship or diplomacy. This is a man who just wanted to drive things forward the way he saw the world should be in his eyes.
But Hitler's difficulty is that there is nothing imperial about him. As the son of a working-class Austrian civil servant, it is not enough to simply proclaim himself the German Führer. He needs to look like one.
He needed to try and assimilate some of the trappings of power and the type of trappings that would be suitable for someone who is ruling a kingdom in the middle of Europe. And of course, what's he going to do? He's going to look back to history to find these things.
He decided that to be an emperor, he would need the possessions of an emperor.
Hitler was looking for an emblem that would underpin his claim to be leading the German people back to a new era.
What do we need? Well, we need various items that are associated with other people in power.
The Holy Roman emperors had held crown jewels as symbols of their authority. An imperial crown, a scepter, and an orb. But of all these symbols of past German glory, one is more important than all the others. It looks like a simple Roman spearhead. It is the Spear of Destiny. The Spear of Destiny was said to be none other than the spear that had pierced the side of Jesus Christ as he hung on the cross. The myth said that it was wielded by a Roman centurion called Longinus.
As the legend is told, Longinus was a Roman centurion who'd served Pilate faithfully, and he got cataracts. He was going blind. And Pilate pulled him out of the ranks because he was no longer of service as a fighter, and gave him relative easy duty at Mount Calvary, making sure the crucifixions went off as planned. It didn't require a lot of fighting, didn't require great eyesight.
The Bible says that this centurion, when inspecting the crucified men, was unsure if Jesus had died. So he thrust his spear into Christ's side.
Blood allegedly dripped down the side of the spear into Longinus's eyes. He was cured of cataracts. He was cured of his blindness. He had a vision of the future. He had a vision of Jesus as the Messiah.
Longinus was converted instantly. As Christianity spreads throughout the world, Longinus's spear, touched by the Son of God, became a revered holy relic. The spear was passed down, first through a succession of Roman emperors, and then to Charlemagne.
Charlemagne carries it into battle, is invincible as long as it's in his hands.
It becomes known as a talisman for conquerors, for military force. It is a military image that it has of vanquishing foes.
Such was its mystique that every Holy Roman Emperor after Charlemagne wanted to possess it. It became a symbol of their authority.
The spear, at a very early point in history, is a reflection of power, of strength.
Legend says that whoever held the spear would be undefeated in battle.
So not only do you get a sense of whoever has this is the true world monarch because he has it, but if you hold it, you're invincible.
It was clear why Hitler wanted it, but he didn't have it. In fact, it was in Vienna, the capital of neighboring Austria. When the Holy Roman Empire was dissolved in 1806, its heirs, the Habsburgs, moved the spear to Austria, where it ended up on display in the Hofburg Palace. And it was here in 1908 that Adolf Hitler, then a struggling Austrian painter, had first seen the spear and begun to covet it.
According to one version of the story, Hitler had actually seen the spear in the museum there, and apparently he may have had some sort of moment of epiphany in which he realised that this was an incredibly important object and he had been sort of touched by it. Whether that's true or not doesn't really matter. The point was, it was regarded as being important.
Hitler had long known where it was, and now he was German Führer. All he had to do was take it. March the 12th, 1938, German troops crossed the border into Austria. The world watched as the Austrian government collapsed. Hitler was killing two birds with one stone. He was reclaiming lands once held by the Roman Empire, and was now on the brink of seizing the spear of destiny.
You've got to realise that Austria and Germany are, in Hitler's eyes, indivisible, and indeed they should never have been divided in the first place.
With Austria in his grasp, Hitler now activated the second part of his plan. To seize the spear.
As the story is told, as the panzers were driving, across the border into Austria, Hitler had an SS officer in civilian garb already planted in the museum. When he was alerted that the border had been crossed, he changed into his uniform, pulled out his gun, and stood guard over those crown jewels. Nobody was to touch them until Hitler arrived.
Hitler arrived in Vienna just 2 days after the invasion.
One of the very first things he does is to go to the Habsburg Museum, go to the display case where the spear and the crown jewels are, and opens it. And takes possession of the spear.
He took hold of the spear on March the 15th. It was not a date picked by accident.
He took the Spear of Destiny on St. Longinus Day. That's when the centurion, who allegedly carried it at the crucifixion, is honored.
Hitler took the spear to the southern German city of Nuremberg, which had been its home for centuries during the reign of the Holy Roman Emperors.
There was absolutely no question where Hitler was going to take the spear once he absconded with it from Austria. He was going to take it back to Nuremberg, back to its spiritual home, what was to be the spiritual headquarters, the spiritual capital of Nazism, of the 1,000-year Reich.
Taking his lead from the Holy Roman Empire, Hitler had decided to place Nuremberg at the center of his new Nazi Reich.
Berlin is the brain, Nuremberg is the heart.
Here he had built vast parade grounds holding hundreds of thousands of spectators. He staged enormous rallies showcasing German military might. Extravagant displays presented the German people with an image of the future based on his vision of the past.
We see newsreels today of the parades going through the streets in Nuremberg, of soldiers dressed as medieval knights. With mock-ups of the chest of the crown jewels, symbolic of being returned to the homeland. The 1,000-year Reich begins.
By displaying the spear and the crown jewels, his message could not have been any clearer.
Ein freies deutsches Volk in einem starken deutschen Reich.
He was the heir to the Holy Roman Emperors.
It was as if King Arthur had finally gotten Excalibur and was marching through town with it. And in a triumphal parade, I got it.
With the Spear of Destiny in his possession, Hitler was convinced he would be unstoppable in his aim to conquer the rest of Europe. But of course, it didn't turn out that way. By the beginning of 1945, 5 years of war has devastated Europe. The spear has failed to bring Hitler the victory he had dreamed of. His ambitions lie in tatters. His empire on the brink of collapse. And in the chaos, the Spear of Destiny, one of the great treasures of Europe, has disappeared. But on an American army base in Belgium, pure luck will allow one man to track it down. Walter Horn is a lieutenant in the US Third Army. His mission? To interrogate German prisoners of war. Horn is no ordinary American GI. For one thing, he's German. And 10 years earlier, he had narrowly escaped the clutches of the SS. In the 1930s, Horn was at university in Heidelberg, southwest Germany. His passion, art history.
His specialty was the relics of the Holy Roman Empire. He was an art history major who just had the misfortune to get his doctoral degree in 1933, just as Adolf Hitler had come to power.
As a historian, Horn found himself being sucked into Hitler's obsession with proving the superiority of the German race. He was invited to join a special unit of the SS created specifically for this purpose, the Ahnenerbe. Promising academics were press-ganged into the Ahnenerbe. The job? To prove at any cost that German culture was superior to every culture in the world. And who better for the Ahnenerbe to recruit than the impressive young academic and PhD, Walter Horn.
Walter was perfect Nazi material. He had been a javelin contender for the Olympics. He came from fifth-generation Germanic, Aryan stock. You know, he was young, he was good-looking, he was well-traveled. This was the kind of man the Nazis were looking for.
But Horn could see exactly where Nazi control of German academic life was leading.
The Ahnenerbe can't just be seen as a kind of harmless bunch of corrupted academics who were just sucking up to the Nazis, because what they were proving was helping to create a worldview that was in essence evil. And some of these theories are directly related to the idea of race, and we all know what happens when you apply these theories to a regime that is as murderous as the Nazis are. It leads directly to the gates of Auschwitz.
Horn wanted no part of it. So in 1934, he decided to flee Germany.
He didn't want to give up his homeland, but he saw no option around it. One thing he knew is he had to get out of Germany. You know, the storm is coming down. This is no place to be.
But as he began his flight to freedom, Horn learned that the SS were after him.
He was very concerned. He hated the Nazis. He didn't know if it was because of remarks that he had made about the Nazis.
To his horror, one SS officer had managed to track him down.
The SS officer had his pistol, and I'm sure Walter was thinking that the end had come.
But Horn was in for yet another surprise.
The SS officer essentially, told him, yes, we're looking for people like you, but good luck. Just don't come back.
Walter Horn eventually managed to escape via Italy and then Cuba to America, where he became a naturalized American citizen. And that is how, as a fluent German speaker, he ended up in Belgium interrogating POWs at the tail end of the war.
As the Allied armies worked their way into Germany, behind the front lines, you've got units doing various sort of ancillary roles that are nevertheless vitally important. One of these, of course, is to hunt for criminals. Straight manhunts. And what these people are doing, these war crimes units, is to hunt for evidence, which hasn't been burnt by the Gestapo.
For months, Horn had been uncovering very little, but one afternoon, a harmless-looking POW changed all that.
Quite late in the day, a relative old man is taken out of the prisoner pen to be interrogated. Private Fritz Huber. Fritz Huber has nothing really to contribute, or so it seems. Private Huber said, I'm sorry, I can't tell you any information because I don't know any information. All I've been doing is, slogging gun cases around. Walter felt sorry for him, offered him a cigarette, offered him a cup of coffee, and they just sat and chatted.
Then, Huber revealed something that would blow Walter Horn's mind.
Huber said, I do know of a special treasure, a hidden treasure. Are you at all interested in art history? Little could Huber have known the man he was talking to had a doctorate in art history. There wasn't anything in the world Walter wanted to hear more about, than art and antiques.
Huber began to tell Horn about a Nazi treasure trove hidden beneath Nuremberg Castle, one which supposedly contained any number of priceless pieces of art. Horn listened intently as Huber listed the sort of items that any imaginary pirate hoard might contain.
Huber was describing various treasures, which could have been any kind of depositories, because we know the Nazis looted, major museums. But this collection was different. He described a scepter. He described a crown. He described a golden orb, what they call, the world orb of Christianity. And then he said, it's a spear. It's a spearhead, Roman spearhead. And of course, Walter knew instantly the collection. There was no question what it was. He was describing, the crown jewels of the Holy Roman Empire and the spear of destiny.
Horn pushed Huber for every detail and was amazed to find out the lengths that the Nazis had gone to protect the Spear of Destiny. Huber said his father had been hired by the head of the Nazi SS, Heinrich Himmler, to install a ventilation system in a hidden vault beneath Nuremberg Castle.
And, oh, by the way, my mother goes in once a week to check on the treasures that are kept in this vault. She has to check the humidity, check against insects. My mother's got to wear white gloves. And as Huber is telling this story, Walter's getting more and more interested.
Huber described a network of tunnels beneath the castle which led out to a secret entrance on the streets below.
It looked like an active, ongoing antique shop and had two doors for bringing items in and out, but of course it was Nazis who were going the in and out.
Aware that he had possibly just uncovered the location of one of the world's great treasures, Horn immediately began to write up a report for his superiors. But fearing the American High Command wouldn't understand the importance of the spear, Horn made sure to write in detail, even drawing a map of the city to show where the vault could be found.
Walter Horn sat at a borrowed typewriter, and he typed up an intelligence report. And of course, being an art historian, I'm sure it reads more like a art history paper than a military intelligence report.
Horn worked quickly. He knew the advancing Allied forces were planning a huge offensive on Nuremberg. And he feared that in the battle, the spear could be destroyed.
He mailed it off, fully thinking that this would be dismissed as tangential to the fighting going on, that what military commander would possibly conceive the Holy Roman Empire, crown jewels, and the Spear of Destiny to be a military objective.
But in another amazing stroke of luck, Horn's report eventually landed on the desk of the one man who had both the power and the will to save the spear. General George S. Patton, also known as Old Blood and Guts, was in command of the US Third Army in Europe and was one of the generals overseeing the invasion of Germany. A flamboyant man, often pictured with 2 silver revolvers, he was a brilliant tank commander and tactician. A Catholic convert, Patton saw himself as a Christian warrior. But more than that, he too was obsessed with the legend of the Spear of Destiny. He had even written a poem about what it must have felt like to plunge the spear into the side of Christ.
I cannot name my battles, for the visions are not clear. Yet I see the twisted faces, and I feel the rending spear. Perhaps I stabbed our Savior in his sacred helpless side. Yet I've called his name in blessing when after times I died.
As US troops battled their way across Europe, Patton had been attempting to track the spear's movements. His fear was that the spear, if not found, might be used as a talisman to inspire a Nazi resurgence. But so far, he had no idea where the spear was, until Walter Horn's report landed on his desk.
Lo and behold, that's exactly what Patton was looking for, and he found it in that intelligence report. Light bulb went off. This was a military objective for Patton.
On the eve of the assault on Nuremberg, Patton took an amazing decision. He ensured that a crack team of soldiers was sent to locate the secret vault. But it would be no easy task. Nuremberg had suffered a series of massive bombing raids. Thousands had died, hundreds of thousands displaced.
They talk about the devastation in Dresden, but the devastation in Dresden essentially came from a fire that spread. In Nuremberg, it was literally from the tons and tons of bombs.
And now the Allies intended to send Hitler a message. They planned to capture Nuremberg on April the 20th, the Führer's birthday. Hitler was adamant that his spiritual capital would not fall.
His instructions are that the defenders of Nuremberg will fight to the last bullet, and that the last man and even the last young child.
On April the 16th, the US Army began a fight to the death for the city. Patton's special unit, sent to locate the spear, was soon caught in the thick of the fighting.
It was narrow, medieval streets, big battlements. It was almost essentially hand-to-hand combat, almost like taking one street after another, and it was very dangerous kind of fighting. Children were actually being used as scouts. The Germans fought right down virtually, to the last man standing.
In the chaos of the battle, Patton's unit, armed with Horn's map, embarked on their dangerous mission to locate the secret vault.
That unit lost many men to work their way where the vault was. When they got there, they couldn't even find it. There had been such devastation, so many bombings, and they weren't even sure that they'd gotten to the location.
But then they made a discovery.
One of them found a crevice, a sort of tunnel-like thing, and they dropped in.
At the end of a long, dark underground tunnel, they found something staggering. Set into thick concrete, a steel vault door 8 feet high and 12 inches thick. But there was a problem. The giant vault doors were locked shut.
The door itself was impenetrable at that point. When one of the munitions men was literally about to, plug dynamite in the sides of this giant vault door.
But just moments before the charges were detonated, a German civilian came forward and stopped the munitions man.
Luckily, he was stopped at the last minute because, God knows what might have happened to the contents inside. A German who, a representative, the mayor of Nuremberg, gave the Allies the combination of this vault. He said, please don't blow this up. Very special things here, and they opened the vault.
Behind the giant door, the GIs discovered a vast and incredibly sophisticated underground complex. This had to be the vault that the prisoner Huber had described, but it was on a scale beyond anything they had imagined. Commissioned by Heinrich Himmler, it was an enormous expansion of old beer cellars beneath the Nuremberg castle.
Himmler secretly sent in teams of architects, teams of builders to reconfigure this beer cellar into a high-tech vault. And I don't use that term high-tech loosely. Foot-thick reinforced steel, special locking mechanisms. The walls were lined with various materials to keep the moisture out. Air purification system, its own generator system. It had water, it had showers, it had baths, it had a kitchen, it had its own little escape hatch. You could have a team of people living in there for months at a time.
The GIs could hardly believe what they had found. But unsure of exactly what they had discovered, the message was sent for Horn to come to Nuremberg to identify the contents of the vault. When Horn arrived, he was shocked by the state of this once beautiful medieval city.
Picture a moonscape, picture churches missing their roofs, bodies strewn about.
Horn was led to the vault. Even though the contents had been described to him by Huber, Horn was stunned by what the vaults contained.
There is just this fantastic room full of Europe's treasure, which can rival anything you'll see in the Louvre or the British Museum. And it really is a real treasure trove. And the guys who went in there realised, my God, I mean, how much had the Nazis taken? You know, every box was just full of something more and more incredible.
Horn was shown a small wooden crate. In it, unmistakable to Horn's expert eyes, was the Spear of Destiny.
Horn became a hero when he recovered the Spear of Destiny. Now the question was, what were they to do with him?
May 1945, the Allies declare victory over Hitler's Nazi regime. 6 years of war draws to a close. Hitler had committed suicide in his Berlin bunker. The Allies uncovered millions of dollars worth of Europe's finest treasures, stolen by the Nazis.
We know the Nazis looted, major museums. Major collections were brought wholesale in by train.
Now began the task of returning these treasures to their rightful owners. Walter Horn had assumed the spear would be returned to Austria.
The Spear of Destiny come from the Hofburg Museum in Vienna. This is where he fully thought they would be returned to. Patton had other ideas.
It seemed that Patton, too, had become bewitched by the power of the Spear of Destiny.
Patton said and openly declared that these relics, this spear of destiny, are not artwork. These are emblems of war, twisted by the Nazis to become symbols of the Third Reich.
Patton was the type of man who very much would have liked the idea of the Spear of Destiny, in his back pocket and wanted to take it back to the United States.
Perhaps he believed, as did Hitler, that whoever possessed the spear would be invincible.
So adamant was Patton on having the spear that Dwight Eisenhower, the supreme commander of all Allied troops in Europe, had to intervene. A huge argument broke out between these two iconic figures. But before it could be resolved, tragedy struck.
His car is hit by a lorry. He's virtually paralyzed. He's in hospital for a short period and then he dies.
With Patton died the last obstacle to the spear returning home to Vienna.
Special plane was dispatched under a very heavy armed guard because these are considered the most valuable treasures that the Nazis had ever looted. And there was a special return ceremony in Austria. And today, they're back in the museum, essentially in the same room, in the same part of the museum where they were when Hitler took them.
But there remains one outstanding question. What was this item that Walter Horn had recovered and that so many people had fought and died for? Could it really be the spear that Charlemagne held, the very spear that pierced Christ's side? Robert Feather, a trained metallurgist, was the first person in 40 years to be allowed to examine the spear scientifically.
I was called in to examine the spear because I'd had previous experience of metallurgical work on ancient artifacts. I trained as a metallurgist and I've sort of done a lot of work in ancient metals and materials.
One of the first tests he did was to see if there were traces of blood on the spear. If it were Christ's blood, it would be the most staggering discovery of all time.
I took swabs of the spear just in case there was any biological material. I mean, if it's a spear, it could have had some blood on it somewhere, and the remotest chance that some of it might be Jesus' blood just occurred. So I thought I'd better do it just in case. Is someone going to say, why didn't you?
But no traces of blood could be found. Next, he did a series of non-destructive tests to uncover the age of the spear.
We did XRF, which is X-ray fluorescent tests. We did microscopic analysis. We did full high-powered X-ray analysis.
These tests finally gave an approximate date to the spear itself. The 7th or 8th century AD.
To say that it was the spear that went into the side of Jesus, I think, is rather difficult, if not virtually impossible.
It's impossible really to have had much contact with someone who had supposedly died 8 centuries before it was made.
Science had proven that the Vienna lance was not the spear that had pierced the side of Christ. So does this mean it is worthless? Had thousands of lives been risked in pursuit of nothing more than a medieval forgery? After all, one uncomfortable fact, even for Hitler, was that it wasn't the only spear claiming to be the spear of destiny.
Problem with the spear is that there are quite a few of them. I mean, I think there are at least 4.
There are competitor spears in different places to the Vienna spear. There's one in Etchmiad in Armenia. It doesn't look very much like a spear, and it's more rather like a Roman bannerhead, but nevertheless they revere it, and There's another one in Poland, which is almost certainly a replica, a later middle-aged reproduction. There's another one in St. Peter's, in the Basilica of St. Peter's, which is said to be part of the spear that pierced the side of Jesus.
But it seems that the spear Hitler coveted had a value that none of the others had.
We know more about the early history of the Vienna spear than any of the others, and we can trace it certainly in written record back to the 8th century.
That date is extremely significant. It was when Charlemagne, the first Holy Roman Emperor, was rising to power. This spear may not have been the spear which pierced Christ's side, but it was the spear held by the Holy Roman Emperors.
There's no question that that spear was the one carried by the Holy Roman Emperors, and that this was the one passed on, throughout history, through tradition, and was the one that Hitler took.
And Hitler had understood something else. It doesn't matter what something is. What matters is what people believe it to be. For centuries, the spear had been revered by the most powerful rulers of Europe, and that, for Hitler, was enough to make it something worth having.
It doesn't really matter whether this was the spear that was shoved into the side of Jesus. It doesn't matter. It's what people think is what matters. It's what people choose to believe.
The fact that it doesn't date back to the crucifixion doesn't make it, to my mind, any less valuable, because what it represents in the larger sense is what's important.
Even though it's very easy today to look at it as all being part of, it's all mumbo jumbo, it's kind of, junk history, it's kind of mythology, it's superstition, it's important.
Yamashta's gold is one of the greatest treasure hoards ever known.
In today's currency, it represents over $100 billion in value.
According to the myth, this incredible fortune was the proceeds of ruthless Japanese looting throughout Asia during World War II. For one amateur treasure hunter, finding the gold became a lifelong obsession.
If he had to get down on his hands and knees and dig with his fingers until they bled, I see him being that kind of man.
But little did he know, he had a mighty rival, one of the most brutal dictators of the 20th century.
Marcos was unquestionably a thug. He was a gangster.
Just when this penniless Filipino had riches beyond his wildest dreams within his grasp, his quest turned into a nightmare.
He's put a target on his back.
This is the extraordinary story of Roger Rojas.
He was willing to be David against Goliath.
Roger was a hero.
And the legend of Yamashta's gold. In May 1970, amateur treasure hunter Roger Rojas was combing the jungles around his hometown of Baguio in the northern Philippines. For over a decade, he'd spent every spare moment searching for a long-lost hoard of treasure. He'd put all his money into his quest. Unless he found it, he faced ruin. Then, after weeks of backbreaking work, at last, Roger spotted something. Had he finally found what he'd been looking for his entire life? Had he found Yamashta's gold? The legend of Yamashta's gold is one of the greatest stories of war loot in history. By 1942, the Japanese Imperial Army had successfully invaded all of Southeast Asia. As they advanced, they mercilessly ransacked country after country. They stole on a massive scale, reportedly unrivaled in military history.
Yamashita's gold is wealth beyond belief. People wouldn't believe how much it is. $1 trillion worth. So it's a mind-blowing amount.
The mastermind heading this covert operation, codenamed the Golden Lily, was said to be Prince Chichibu, the emperor's brother.
This guy is brilliant. Prince Chichibu was a perfect choice to head up the Golden Lily because he wasn't just a military man, he was an Oxford scholar, and he brought an incredible amount of creativity and lateral thinking to how we'll go about this complex process of looting.
The Golden Lily operatives just completely took everything from all the countries. They left them with nothing. They invaded, they took all their wealth, and just left them penniless.
It wasn't just banks and financial institutions, but it also had museums, temples, art galleries, rare books, anything that was worth money. They knew about it, knew where it was, how much it was worth, and they took it. The Golden Lily's looting was so comprehensive, they even targeted the underworld, the gangster world, the black markets, and they absolutely drained them of anything that was of value.
Having amassed treasures of all shapes and sizes, the Golden Lily's mission was far from over. They needed to get it back home, to Japan. First, they melted the gold into easy-to-move ingots. But this smelting also served a shadier purpose.
When gold is made, it's stamped, and you can tell where it came from. But when it's been resmelted, you don't know where it came from. So he wanted to stamp the little sign on the gold bars that the gold was actually made in Japan. Then it would look like the gold was Japanese gold of Japanese origin.
This stolen gold was then brought to the Philippines. There it was inventoried and then sent on to Japan by ship.
The Philippines was chosen as the Golden Lily's transportation hub because it was pretty much in the center of the vast Japanese empire.
For the first year of operations, the Golden Lily's transportation network ran like clockwork. But then, the tide of the war turned. In June 1942, Japanese and US forces met near the tiny Pacific island of Midway. Over just 4 days, the US forces sank 5 Japanese ships. They destroyed 270 aircraft and killed 3,500 men. The Japanese had lost control of the seas. Now it was too risky for them to ship the gold home. They needed a new plan. They turned to their finest fighting general, Tomoyuki Yamashita.
He has an incredible track record. Nobody has the reputation he does, and if anyone can pull one out of the hat, it would be him.
Yamashita made his name when he caused the greatest humiliation of the British Army in its history. In December 1941, he invaded Malaya, sweeping down the peninsula in only a matter of weeks. Yamashita then captured the British military stronghold of Singapore.
Hitherto, both Malaya and Singapore had been thought to be completely unassailable, that the British were totally in charge militarily, and he proved them wrong. He made the British capitulate, and it was the biggest capitulation of the British Army in British military history.
Virtually overnight, Yamashita took nearly 100,000 Allied soldiers prisoner. His victory sent shockwaves across the world and earned Yamashita his fearsome nickname, the Tiger of Malaya. With the gold now stuck in the Philippines, Yamashita was being asked to come up with another miracle. The story goes, he was told to hide the gold until it was safe to move it. He identified 175 suitable burial sites across the Philippines. They would hold the gold until the Japanese were once again victorious. And the Philippines proved the ideal place to hide this treasure.
They put it in very isolated parts throughout the Philippines, mostly covered by very mountainous terrain and a thick, thick jungle. Once you got these tunnels built, it would become virtually impossible to see that there had been anything ever buried there because of the growth rate in the jungle.
It said Yamashita ordered detailed maps to be made of the exact location of each treasure vault. And each map was carefully encoded.
These maps were done in an old Japanese dialect called kanji, a language which is between 1,500 and 2,000 years old, and there were no topographical references on them. They used the old characters to represent certain landmarks.
Unless you knew the complex code, these maps were meaningless. And there were even further layers of security.
Bombs, grenades, decoy walls that would lead you into another trap.
The Golden Lily left nothing to chance, and they had a vast system of booby traps that consisted of poisonous gas, explosives, complex use of the water table, so if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to drown in your pursuit of reaching the treasures.
But the maps that were drawn highlighted where all those traps were. If you didn't have a map and you went into one of these treasure vaults, it's very likely that you wouldn't come out alive.
And to ensure all the treasure vault locations remained top secret, the number of people in the know was ruthlessly kept to a minimum.
They used prisoner of war or local slave labor to build the actual treasure vaults. And the people who are building it don't know why, but that's irrelevant. They're gonna die anyway. So they're usually killed, shot on the spot.
But for all Yamashita's efforts, the gold still wasn't safe. In October 1944, the Americans landed in the Philippines. The fighting that followed was the bloodiest of the Pacific War.
The fighting in the Philippines at the end of the war was extremely brutal.
Yamashita would fight to the very last man for the emperor.
But even a master tactician like Yamashita couldn't stop the Americans' advance.
The Philippines has 7,000 plus islands and is very, very difficult to defend against an invading force. Yamashita, as a great general, would have known that.
Yamashita faced a crisis. He knew he couldn't hold the Philippines. All he could do was drag out the fight for as long as possible. And it seemed there was one particular reason Yamashita needed to buy himself time. He still hadn't finished burying the gold.
Golden Lily are running out of time and desperate. So they've got these ships in the harbor with gold that they need to get into the tunnels. They have no time. What do? They scuttle them and sink them.
April 1945. Yamashita had been forced to retreat back to the mountains around the northern city of Baguio.
Their systematic hiding of their national treasure becomes less systematic and more panicked. They need to do it immediately because they're about to suffer defeat. 174 treasure vaults done and dusted. Only one is left.
With time running out, Yamashita ordered the chief engineers to seal the final treasure vault.
These engineers knew everything. They knew how the maps were made. They knew where the burial sites were. They knew how they were booby-trapped.
What they didn't know was Yamashita had one last move to protect the gold. The story goes that while the engineers were carrying out his orders, Yamashita sealed the vault himself. The engineers were still inside. Now, they would be its guardians for eternity. Three months later, World War II was over. General Yamashita was put on trial for war crimes.
Did you at any time issue any orders directing the killing of non-combatant citizens?
Absolutely not. Anything.
The trial lasted just over 5 weeks.
The commission finds you guilty as charged and sentences you to death by hanging.
Yamashita took the secrets of the gold to his grave. There was only one other person who allegedly knew of the gold's whereabouts: Prince Chichibu. And in 1953, he died of TB.
Anybody who knew anything about this treasure is now dead.
It seemed Yamashita's gold was lost forever. But in the Philippines, after the horrors of war, the legend of Yamashita's gold lived on.
There were lots and lots of rumors that the Japanese had buried treasure all over the Philippines.
It's almost a national obsession. Everybody across the country is aware of it, and everyone's looking for it.
Among those who'd grown up with stories about the gold was a young Filipino locksmith. Rogelio Rojas, better known as Roger, was born in 1943, just as Yamashita's gold was being buried.
Roger's childhood was really difficult. The Philippines are extremely impoverished. His family is impoverished.
Roger was one of millions of Filipinos growing up in the shadow of World War II.
The war had devastated the Philippines. Manila was absolutely on its knees in a way that no other city in the whole of the Second World War, other than Warsaw. It was dreadful. Hundreds of thousands killed, families broken up, desperate poverty, no real economy going. It was in a really bad state.
So it's no surprise that the legend of Yamashita's gold just took Roger by heart at a very young age. Someone that poor with a possibility of obtaining wealth beyond your wildest dreams, of course you're going to go for it.
Roger the locksmith lived in Baguio, the northern city, near to where Yamashita made his last stand.
Roger surmises that they must have hid some of the treasure around his town. So he looks around his town right from the start, because he knows logically that's probably one of the best places to start.
Roger was a very diligent man. Every spare moment he was out there working, seeing what he could find, eliminating areas, and continuing to move forward in a very logical, progressive manner.
To help him in his quest, Roger scrimped and saved and bought himself a metal detector. Yet all Roger had ever managed to find were a few old coins and some Japanese ammunition. But that didn't shake his faith. One day he was sure he would come across the treasure he'd been dreaming of since he was a boy.
No matter how many disappointments a treasure hunter has, they will always keep going.
Then, in 1961, after years of hunting the gold with just youthful optimism, Roger had what seemed to be a breakthrough. He got the kind of clue he'd been longing for, a map of a tunnel complex. There were lots of maps and sketches like this in treasure hunting circles at the time. Roger had seen plenty of them before, but all had been fakes. This one was different. This map had come from a Japanese soldier.
He's convinced that this is the real deal.
Trouble was, the map was in the Golden Lily's fiendishly complex code.
It's a needle in a haystack, and you don't even know where the haystack is because the map has no topographical features.
But Roger also knew that this Japanese soldier had been in Baguio with a group of engineers as they buried gold during the final days of Yamashita's retreat. The map allegedly related to one of those treasure vaults.
It was getting closer. He could feel it.
Roger never gives up. And the reason is he knows the treasure is there. And he knows that year after year, if nothing else, he's eliminating where it isn't.
Yet for all his high hopes, Roger just couldn't crack the map's code. And so, even after looking for several more years, he was still no closer to finding Yamashita's gold. But at least the map confirmed to Roger his first instincts were right. There had to be treasure somewhere around Baguio.
He knows it's there. This is not a myth. This is historical fact.
Then Roger met a man who seemed to offer him his next breakthrough, Eusebio Okubo. Okubo told Roger he had served under the Japanese as an interpreter during their occupation of the Philippines.
There were a lot of Filipinos who claimed to know where Japanese buried treasure was, mainly because an awful lot of Filipinos had, perforce, worked with the Japanese, not necessarily what we would call collaborators, but simply because the Japanese needed cooks, drivers, interpreters, all that sort of thing.
When Roger met Akubo, he would have had mixed feelings. Here's somebody who colluded with the enemy.
Akubo confessed he had served none other than General Yamashita. While working for him, Akubo had witnessed Yamashita taking a large quantity of gold to Baguio towards the very end of the war. And then, Akubo revealed the crucial piece of information Roger was after. This gold was in wooden boxes, stashed in a tunnel not far from Baguio General Hospital.
So this was the final link. This allowed him to tie the bow together and have the perfect package. Now he knows where to go, he knows where to dig. He was elated because it now pinpointed the area for him to look at.
But little did Roger know, he had a rival. The most powerful man in the Philippines, President Ferdinand Marcos. In 1965, Marcos had been democratically elected. But he rapidly became a pathologically greedy dictator.
Money was extremely important to Ferdinand Marcos. He loved it like nothing else.
And there was only one person who could match Marcos's greed. His shopaholic wife, Imelda.
Marcos wooed Imelda, it is said, by taking her down to the vault beneath his bank and just showing her enormous great stacks of $100 bills. Whether or not this is true or not, I don't know, but it's extremely likely. And I should think it almost certainly would have convinced her that she was onto a good thing.
But Imelda's lavish lifestyle wasn't the only reason Marcos needed money.
The richer you were, the more powerful you were. It's that simple. It's a very simple equation.
And nothing could make Marcos more powerful than finding Yamashita's gold.
It's not at all surprising that Marcos was interested in Yamashita's gold because he was a thug, basically, and the mere thought of the promise of gold, and he would have been onto it like a shot.
Compared to Roger, Marcos had a serious advantage in the hunt for Yamashita's gold: power.
It was incredibly easy for Marcos to use his power to find the gold. He has entire armies at his disposal. Armies, ships, experts on maps and deciphering all sorts of clues.
Despite all these resources, Marcos hadn't found anything. And so he devised a shrewd strategy.
He was a brilliant politician, but he was also brilliantly corrupt. On the surface, he seemed to be a rational person, going by the law, by the books, but in person, he was quite ruthless.
Marcos passed a law demanding treasure hunters apply for a permit, detailing where they were going to start digging.
He comes up with the permit system because this way he has all the enthusiastic treasure hunters all across the country working for him because they've now told him where they think the treasure is.
He's just waiting to see if anyone finds it, then he can move in because he has the resources to do that. And you know, that's very smart.
Meanwhile, back in Baguio, in 1970, Roger married. With a new wife and child on the way, he needed Yamashita's gold now more than ever. And so Roger dutifully applied for one of Marcos's permits.
Roger did everything the right way. He thought that if he followed the rules that had been put in place by the government, he would be able to search, he would be able to find and excavate and recover, and it would all be done with the blessings of the government.
In Roger's town, the person who manages that application is none other than Marcos's uncle.
In May 1970, armed with his permit, his map, and Akubo's information, Roger decided to risk everything to find Yamashita's gold. He spent all his life savings hiring a team of laborers. Together they started hacking their way through the thick jungle vegetation near Baguio General Hospital.
So it was really difficult for Roger to find the tunnel near the hospital because it was 25 years before that it was blasted shut. And every single year in the rainy season, these jungles, they change their look and feel dramatically.
Then, after 2 weeks of almost non-stop searching, Roger spotted the mouth of a cave. Could this be the entrance to the treasure vault Akubo told him about? A 100 meters into the tunnel, a collapse meant Roger couldn't go any further. But for Roger, this was a good sign. He knew the Japanese had used dynamite to blast their treasure vaults shut. And so Roger and his crew began the arduous task of clearing the way.
The conditions for Roger and the team digging the tunnel would have been horrific. It was hot, there were insects, there were snakes. It was very, very hard work.
Digging the tunnel was very, very dangerous. And Roger knew that if this really was a tunnel that the Japanese had built, there may be booby traps.
But Roger was willing to risk his life to get to Yamashita's gold.
Once you get that gold fever, it is insatiable. You just cannot quench that appetite. He was becoming obsessed. One more spade, one more rock. I'm going to get it. This is going to be the treasure of a lifetime. And everybody's going to say, yes, you found it.
Finally, after 4 long months of digging, they broke through. It was then he made a grim discovery. Skeletons dressed in rags. But these weren't just any rags. They were Japanese military uniforms. Surely these were the remains of the engineers who had hidden Yamashita's gold, only to be buried alive by Yamashita himself.
He thinks he's there, and he knows now that he has all the pieces to the puzzle. He is literally at the threshold of the gold recovery that he has sought now for 10 years. It's there, it's within his fingertips' grasp.
Stretching beyond the skeletons was a vast network of tunnels. Roger and his team spent weeks exploring them. Day after day, they found nothing.
The next day, he was out there ready to go again. He knew it was there. He believed in his heart of hearts that that gold was there. He was going to go after it no matter what.
But a full 6 months on from finding the entrance to the tunnel, Roger still hadn't found any treasure.
Roger had spent all the money that he had raised to start the dig to begin with, and no one was going to give him any more money.
No money meant no crew. It seemed the hunt was over. Roger had squandered his life savings on a huge mistake. Just before Roger decided to give up once and for all, he had one last go with his metal detector. Then he heard its telltale buzz.
This buzz that Roger got from his metal detector must have been the best sound he'd ever heard in his life.
Roger was stunned. Hiding behind the wall was a gold statue of Buddha.
This was that moment in life that you would look back on and you say, yes, I have achieved my goal for my entire life. This is it. This find is the most significant find of anything that anybody had discovered in the Philippines.
The Buddha was in the Burmese style. According to the legend, the Japanese had looted religious artifacts from temples right across Burma. He really must have found one of Yamashita's 175 treasure vaults. And that wasn't all. The area around the Buddha was stacked full of wooden boxes. Finally, it was payday.
The gold that Roger has just discovered is worth a fortune. Each of those bars is worth $1,000, and he estimated there were over 1,000 boxes of the gold bars. So you're talking an incredible amount of money, more treasure than even he ever dreamed he would find. I mean, this has surpassed his wildest expectations.
Roger returned home with the Buddha, planning to go back for the gold with trucks and men. But the more he looked at the statue, the more curious Roger became. There was something about it that wasn't quite right. The Buddha was full of diamonds.
The value had just gone off the chart.
Roger, I mean, he's getting richer and richer by the minute. He has 1,000 boxes of gold bars, he has a gold Buddha, and now he has handfuls of diamonds.
That night, Roger documented his life-changing find. News of Roger's miraculous discovery soon spread to the presidential palace.
I can just imagine him going crazy when the word had gotten to him. Marcos was going to do anything to get that Buddha away from Rojas, and it was going to eventually sit in Marcos' palace.
Unfortunately for Roger, Marcos's primary tactic was brute force. On the 5th of April 1971, it's said a group of mysterious men turned up at Roger's house.
Rojas didn't answer the door.
You have to ask yourself, how would you feel if all of a sudden at 2:30 in the morning, there's loud banging and knocking on the door? I think he'd be panic-stricken, and I'm sure he was.
They said, you have 3 minutes to open the door or we're going to shoot you right here. They took everything away from him.
Can you imagine the feeling of violation? His entire life he's looked for this, he's found it, and now it's been taken.
But if Marcos thought he could intimidate Roger and his family, he was wrong.
Roger had risked everything to find this gold, and he wasn't going to let it go so easily.
Roger reported the theft to the police.
By that time, President Marcos had a considerable stranglehold on the police and the army particularly.
But Marcos did not yet control the media. Within days, the press picked up Roger's story.
It was a huge scandal. You know, there's stolen loot, it's World War II, it's the Japanese, it's Marcos being implicated.
The newspaper was full of articles that were nothing short of calling Marcos a common thief.
The hostile press coverage came at a critical time for Marcos.
He was widely known to have fixed his second term of office, the elections, which were ludicrously corrupt. I mean, he allegedly won by 2 million votes. It was just impossible. He was widely lampooned on all sides for corruption, and he was beginning to feel himself quite insecure.
Marcos needed to silence this treasure hunter fast. There was one obvious solution.
The Marcos regime was notorious for extrajudicial executions. You'd have death squads basically killing people who were seen as being very critical of the regime.
But this time, Marcos needed a different approach.
I think by that time he must have thought that the story had enough public exposure for him not to be able to risk just making Roger vanish, like a lot of his opponents.
3 weeks later, Roger at last received some good news. He was told his Buddha was waiting to be collected at the courthouse in Baguio. When he got there, he was in for a shock.
When Roger saw the Buddha, he knew immediately this wasn't the Buddha that he had found. It was a different color, different shape, facial expression. The head didn't come off.
Marcos is expecting Roger to say, yes, that's the Buddha, thank you.
But he didn't know Rojas. Rojas was determined. He wasn't going to let that boot up. And this was a huge mistake for Marcos because he had misread Rojas' personality.
Roger declared the Buddha was a fake.
I think that was completely reckless of him, because by that time he would have known that he was a marked man, and to cause that kind of fuss, effectively tackling Marcos himself at a personal level, would have been absolutely ridiculous and very stupid, in my view. However, he did it. He clearly was a very stubborn man.
Now he's publicly given him 2 fingers. Really, this marks the beginning of the end for Roger.
Just over 2 weeks later, more mysterious men came for Roger. And it seems it wasn't long before interrogation turned to torture. Over several days, Roger said he was repeatedly burned with cigarettes. He was beaten. And electrocuted. Eventually, Roger claimed he signed an affidavit stating Marcos had nothing to do with the theft of his Buddha, and revealed the location of the thousands of gold ingots.
Roger was a very broken man when he signed that affidavit. I mean, There he was, fighting publicly, but now admitting that no, there was no wrongdoing. He must have been completely demoralized.
Marcos had Roger imprisoned and wasted no time helping himself to the rest of Roger's find. But eventually Marcos's megalomania would prove his undoing. In 1986, a popular revolution forced Marcos and Imelda to flee the country. The Filipino people stormed Marcos's presidential palace, and what they found inside was unbelievable.
They were amazed at what they found. They found treasures of statues and art and thousands of pairs of shoes. This is just what they left behind.
Marcos was by far and away the wealthiest man alive.
They were so wealthy, they didn't really know what to do with their money.
One of the questions for the Filipino people was where had the Marcoses' enormous wealth come from? For most, there was an obvious answer.
Marcos's wealth primarily came from theft, embezzlement, and corruption. And you can look back, I think, on their joint reign as simply being a plot of self-enrichment. And the administration of the Philippines was merely a secondary item.
They were basically using the public treasury as their piggy bank.
Years later, while on trial for fraud and embezzlement, Imelda Marcos's defense declared their fortune was not looted from the Philippine treasury, but actually came from finding Yamashita's gold.
I think Imelda claimed that their joint wealth came primarily from finding Yamashita's gold because it was a very good blind. Nobody could prove otherwise. Yamashita's gold was just a wonderful alibi.
But for Roger Rojas, none of this mattered. His life was in ruins.
Roger never fully recovered from his torture. And the damage is so great that he can't see out of his right eye for the rest of his life after this. He's lost his money, he's lost his self-respect, he's lost his wife. Roger has lost everything.
Despite all this, Roger still had a bit of the spirit that had helped him find the gold.
It's a treasure hunter's mentality. They must get to the end of the story. They must get the treasure. Anyway, Roger had lost so much, he had nothing to lose.
With Marcos in exile in Hawaii, Roger filed a lawsuit against him. Even when Marcos died 1 year later, in September 1989, the case continued.
You could say that the Marcoses actually got away with it. He went out, lived his exile in Hawaii, and died of natural causes. You could well say that they did rather well out of it.
It would take a further 7 years before Roger was at last vindicated. In 1996, the jury concluded Marcos had stolen Roger's find. $43 billion in damages were awarded.
When the court finds in Roger's favor, it's a significant moment in legal history. $43 billion is awarded to Roger, which is the biggest civil lawsuit award in history.
Sadly, Roger never saw justice done. On the eve of his day in court, he died. He was just 49 years old. Then, in 1998, the huge compensation award was overturned. While no court has challenged the verdict that Marcos stole Roger's treasure, how to determine its value is still being fought out by the lawyers.
It's hard not to look back at Roger and feel empathy for this man. His determination was boundless. And I think, if nothing else, Roger was a hero. And I think that's how he's going to be remembered.
He was willing to be David against Goliath. He was willing to put his life on the line, and therefore my hat off to him.
Roger's tragic story begs the question, was what he found a one-off? Or as the legend states, are there another 174 treasure vaults still waiting to be discovered? Since the war, treasure hunters from across the world have scoured the Philippines in search of Yamashta's gold. Yet none of them have found anything. Nonetheless, people are still willing to risk their lives looking.
Searching for Yamashta's gold is a very dangerous activity. Even to this day, I think it was in 2000, 2 men were buried alive looking for treasure.
What drives them is their certainty that Yamashta's gold is still out there.
The legend of Yamashta's gold in the Philippines is huge, and it hasn't died.
It endures because it's real, because there really are burial sites. There really is gold bars, gold dishes, gold treasures that are still to be found in the islands of the Philippines.
The Salzkammergut Lake District in Austria is known as the Devil's Dustbin. At the end of World War II, rumors spread that the Nazis came here to hide Europe's plundered gold.
Gold oiled Hitler's war machine. Gold was essential to Hitler.
As the Allies closed in, the Nazis started hiding their loot wherever they could.
I saw them throwing the boxes into the lake.
And there's one lake so deep and so remote that it's said to have been the Nazis' favorite dumping site, Lake Toplitz. The stories of what's been dubbed the Nazis' El Dorado have obsessed treasure hunters for the last 70 years.
Man stops thinking logically when it comes to gold.
When a team of divers explored Lake Toplitz for the first time.
On the monitor, I could see there's something there.
They didn't discover gold, but something every bit as extraordinary. The dying days of World War II. Hitler was in his bunker, unable to accept defeat. But most Nazis knew the game was up. It was time to start hiding evidence of their crimes. A unit of SS officers were instructed to transport boxes to the Salzkammergut Lake District in the Austrian Alps. But their mission ground to a halt. The road didn't go as far as the lake they'd been instructed to reach. They needed alternative transport to get their secret cargo to its destination, Lake Toplitz. Ida Weisenbacher was 21 years old when the SS woke her grandfather demanding assistance.
At 5 a.m. they called, and straight away they were at the door, the 2 SS men. They needed a horse and cart to get to Lake Toplitz. And then my grandfather said, that's not possible. The horses haven't been fed yet. No, they needed the horse and cart. It was really important. You've got to harness the horses.
Ida Weisenbacher was terrified for her life and quickly followed instructions.
They said it has to be done quickly. The boxes have to go to Lake Toplitz.
But Ida noticed something that puzzled her. The boxes weren't all the same.
There were heavy ones and light ones. They were different, big and small. The small ones were heavy, really heavy.
Ida asked what was in the heavy boxes, but was met with a stony silence.
The SS man who came with me didn't give anything away. I asked, where are you from? He wouldn't tell me anything. It was all very strict. Everything had to disappear in great secrecy.
Ida made the journey 3 times, and when they got to the lake the second time, she witnessed something bizarre.
When I got back with the second load, I saw them throwing the boxes into the lake.
She didn't realize it at the time, but what Ida Weisenbacher witnessed may have been one of the final acts of the biggest bank heists in history. The sheer scale of the Nazis' theft of Europe's treasures was astonishing.
The plunder of Europe was, from the beginning, a part of the Nazi war plan. It was their idea to collect everything which was valuable across Europe.
The Nazis plundered the museums and private collections of the newly occupied countries for priceless works of art.
Hitler was an art fan, and he was fascinated by art, treasures. He collected things. He tried to get hold of ancient paintings, ancient statues by famous painters, by famous artists.
Hitler's deputy, head of the Luftwaffe, Hermann Göring, personally amassed a vast collection of looted art and gold, sent to him from across occupied Europe, estimated to have been worth $200 million. But from the beginning, what the Nazis wanted most of all was gold. Gold bars that could be stored in bank vaults and exchanged for foreign currency whenever it was needed.
It started in 1938 with the occupation of Austria. They took the national reserves of Austria the moment they entered Vienna. They continued in Czechoslovakia and went on, because what the Nazis, of course, needed was gold.
The Nazis stole $2.5 million worth of gold from Czechoslovakia, $200 million worth of gold from France and Belgium, and later in the war, $30 million from Hungary and $100 million from Italy.
The Nazis stole the gold from the gold reserves of the countries that they conquered. Gold was essential to Hitler. Everybody has the mythical idea that Hitler was just, and Germany was rolling in money as it is now. But in fact, Germany didn't have enough food to feed its people.
In total, Berlin accumulated $500 million worth of foreign gold, the equivalent of over $36 billion in today's money. Gold fed the Nazi war machine.
They smelted down the gold, they stamped it with fake stamps as if it came from the Prussian mint, and they sent it to Zurich, and the Swiss gave them foreign currency for it.
Swiss banks became complicit in the Nazis' theft of Europe's gold.
An American investigating group determined that of the $400 million, which is a lot of money then, 50 years ago, of the $400 million that was sent to Switzerland from Germany, 300 million of it was stolen.
There is a reason why the Nazis never attacked Switzerland, because it was their banking place. It was their way to shore up their treasures, but it was also their place to do the trade with all sorts of foreign countries.
The Americans and the Allies begged the Swiss to stop taking the gold, and they refused. They continued to take gold until 1945, when the Germans had more or less lost the war.
But there was only so much gold in Europe's banks Hitler and his armies could steal. The SS were instructed to find alternative sources.
They began to run out of gold, so what did? They did, as we know, this terrible war crime. Before the Jews were killed in Auschwitz, they pulled the gold out of their mouths, and they melted it down into bars.
The SS stripped concentration camp victims of an estimated $70 million worth of gold teeth and jewelry. But by 1945, as the Allies swept into Germany, some Nazis began to consider the unthinkable. What if they lost? Where would they go? And what would they do with their stolen gold?
The Germans kept these gold bars and other robbed treasures, and particularly art, out of the way of anybody who might have grabbed it.
The Nazi gold was under threat. Hitler instructed the SS to make Berlin's reserves disappear.
They started to move things, to move treasures, to move gold underground in mountain deposits.
But the Americans got wind of Hitler's orders. On the 4th of April 1945, they entered the German town of Merkers and discovered a vast hoard in an abandoned salt mine. Over 8,000 gold bars, worth $240 million.
The 100 tons of gold bullion represents most of Germany's reserve.
They couldn't believe their eyes. They were just blinded by the incredible amount of gold just packed away there.
It wasn't just gold, but over 1 billion German marks, millions in foreign currency, and 400 tons worth of priceless works of art. But it was only part of the stolen hoard. The Allies knew the Nazis were on the run and looking to hide.
One of the best places to do that was Austria, and specifically the mountains of Austria and the Salzkammergut.
Secretly, the Nazis sent freight trains south in the hope of evading the Americans approaching from the west and the Russians from the east.
When those trains rolled into the Salzkammergut, they were just packed up to the top with all sorts of treasures, gold, valuables, paintings, all the Nazis finally could get hold of before they had to leave.
Some of Hitler's most senior generals fled with their loot, including second in command in the SS, Ernst Kaltenbrunner.
Kaltenbrunner, this high-ranking SS criminal, took the stuff he had collected during the years of his career and brought it back here to the Salzkammergut.
Kaltenbrunner took refuge in this house by Lake Autosee, 16 miles from Lake Toplitz.
Kaltenbrunner tried to contact the Americans because he had these plans to make a separate peace with the Americans.
But when his overtures of negotiation were rejected, Kaltenbrunner fled, but not before burying his loot.
When Kaltenbrunner finally left the Salzkammergut and tried to flee, what he left behind and what was found was gold in his garden. He just simply took cases full of gold and hid them in his garden, and those were dug up in the first weeks after the war.
But it wasn't just Kaltenbrunner burying gold. In the south of Austria, American GIs uncovered over 700 Nazi gold bars buried in a shallow hole in the ground. And the stories of hidden Nazi gold started to percolate throughout the Salzkammergut.
There is eyewitnesses telling you about famous Nazis, just like Heinrich Müller, the head of the Gestapo, coming here in the final days of the war, riding into the Salzkammergut, together with about 15 officers on motor cars with sidecars, and that they were full of cases with valuables and gold. And they went up to the mountains and didn't come back.
But the majority of the rumors centered on one lake. The same lake that Ida Weisenbacher had witnessed boxes being thrown into. Lake Toplitz.
Toplitz is an absolutely fascinating geological phenomenon. It's a long lake. It's a ravine that's filled in as deep as Big Ben, several hundred feet.
The Nazis knew all about Lake Toplitz. Joseph Goebbels' holiday villa was close by. Because of its 103-meter depth and remote location, from 1943, it had been used as a naval testing station. In its dark waters, the Nazis experimented with underwater explosives and submarines, testing them at different depths. They fired torpedoes from underwater into the lakeside mountain, gouging out large cavities in its canyon walls.
The Germans used it to test new submarine missiles. They tested a submarine missile that eventually became the Polaris missile. So there's a lot of junk at the bottom of that lake. Used ammunition, God knows what.
Lake Toplitz was seen by SS Command as an ideal place to sink the Nazi horde and stop the Allies getting their hands on it. And one day, when things improved, they would return and retrieve it. Eyewitness Ida Weisenbacher still lives just a couple of miles from Lake Toplitz and remembers the day the SS arrived. It's the same house she lived in as a young girl when she was ordered to help them transport heavy boxes to the lake.
I
said, are you crazy? Why would you throw them in the lake? No, they had to go in. There was something that didn't belong here anymore.
But precisely what was in the heavy boxes, she did not know. Could they have contained the missing Nazi gold? A week after the SS dumped their load into Lake Toplitz, on the 8th of May 1945, the Nazis surrendered. The Allied nations celebrated victory. But where was all the missing Nazi gold? After the war, as the years went by, the stories of what was thrown into Lake Toplitz grew and grew. Because of what Ida had seen and the reports of buried gold being dug up, everyone seemed to be convinced that there must be gold lying at the bottom of the lake. In the 1950s, local boy Gerhard Zauner grew up on the stories of buried treasure in Toplitz.
As children, we discovered a lot of things that were thrown into the lake after the war. I went to these places hundreds of times, and with your fingers, you go through the silt. Over here, one Nazi bigwig lived, and over there another, and in the lakes they lived next to, you could find things.
In the post-war years, amateur divers attempted to reach the bed of Lake Toplitz to recover its Nazi treasure. But Toplitz is a highly unusual lake. No oxygen exists below 20 meters, so nothing perishes. With its steep, wooded banks, trees fall in and form a false bottom of floating logs, under which, if you get trapped, there's often no way back to the surface. Two German scientists who had worked in the Nazis' naval station during the war drowned when they attempted to get to the bottom of Toplitz. Their deaths only heightened the rumors of what was hidden in the lake. Only now, people said the lake was cursed. In the late 1950s, the stories of gold dumped into Lake Toplitz proved irresistible to one journalist. Working at Germany's biggest-selling magazine, Der Stern, investigative reporter Wolfgang Loerde had reached the top of his profession.
In those days, you always had to be there first and come back with a picture and a story for the magazine. And it was tough having to be the first all the time. It wears you out. I even had a plane at my disposal.
Loerde painstakingly pieced together the story of what happened at Lake Toplitz, collating information gleaned from Nazi documents, local rumors, and even the confessions of former Nazi generals in South America.
At first, I didn't know anything about the gold. I only stumbled upon it when I did some research afterwards into how things had happened.
Based on what he'd discovered, Loerder persuaded his editors to finance the first large-scale exploration of Toplitz, on the grounds that he might just get the scoop of the decade. And it helped that Wolfgang Loerder wasn't just a journalist.
I was in the Navy. I was a naval officer during the war. So I know how to operate underwater.
Toplitz is fed from a smaller lake above and feeds into a larger lake below, which gives it a sequence of unique but dangerous currents. Loerder had to establish exactly how he could navigate the precarious movements of the lake all the way to the bottom, 103 meters down.
I had to calculate with what speed and at what level the lake would move. I did that in the winter of '58 for the first time. The lake was still frozen and was just starting to melt. And this way you can see exactly how the streams from Toplitz develop.
And even if he managed to work out the currents, getting whatever was down there to the surface presented a whole other set of problems. Loerder adapted technology he had used in the Marines.
I did the calculations and then we built ourselves a claw gripper. We had built the gripper in such a way that it opens when it goes down. And then a rope had to be pulled, so it closes when it is down. And when it was closed, we would pull the box up. You learn a lot in the Navy.
De Stern commissioned a fleet of VW Dormobiles to transport Loerder and his team of divers, photographers, and writers to Austria. But it was very much Loerder's story. He would lead the exploration and write daily reports as he went. Loerder attached to the claw gripper lights and a camera, which would relay pictures to the crew on the surface. With the information he had acquired from locals and former Nazis, Loerder had a good idea where the suspected gold had been sunk.
Using my calculations, we eased down the claw gripper, down to the 100 meters depth of the lake.
They scanned the entire lake for 2 weeks and found nothing. But Loerder was determined, and just when they were ready to give up, told his team they had to continue into the darkness.
We searched some more at night, with the camera on the bed of the lake. In the beginning, we didn't find anything. But then through the cable on the monitor, I could see there is something there. At about 11 at night, we saw a box.
Loerder's team could barely contain their excitement. Had they found the missing Nazi gold?
The camera lit up the box. Then the claw gripper came and it picked it up. When it was 2-3 meters from the surface, I stopped. Otherwise, the box would have burst open.
If they dropped the box, Loerde's story would sink with it. He wasn't going to take that risk.
I dived in, tied some rope underwater, and wrapped it around the box. Then I resurfaced and gave them the rope.
But when they brought the box to the surface, no one was sure what was inside. The next morning, the world's media waited with bated breath. Amongst the crowd was local boy Gerhard Zauner, who still remembers the day that changed his life.
For us, it was sensational. We all went to Lake Toplitz with our parents to witness the salvation of this treasure. This was a big motivation for me. I had to get down there.
But it wasn't just Zauner and his family who were on tenterhooks to see what was in Loerde's recovered box.
The police came and the public. 80 or 90 people. It was a scrum. Then we pulled the box up. The box burst open. But there wasn't any gold in there.
To the crowd's astonishment, the Stern team hadn't found gold, but millions and millions of pristine British banknotes.
We brought them up, and after 16 or 17 boxes, we thought, this is nonsense. We leave them all down there and tear the lids open underwater, and then we can see if it is gold or... But they were just notes.
It was the beginning of a whole new mystery. What were these pounds? And why had they been sunk in Lake Toplitz? The mystery deepened when it was revealed the pounds weren't quite what they seemed.
Lake Toplitz in Austria, and the end of a long search which for years puzzled Scotland Yard and the international police. Down there at the bottom of the lake are boxes of printing plates and notes, the clue to what must be the biggest forgery of all time.
What Loerde and his De Stern team had discovered wasn't gold, but 73 million pounds worth of perfectly forged banknotes. The equivalent of almost 3 billion pounds in today's money. Just why they were there, nobody knew. But unraveling the mystery of the counterfeit pounds would make Wolfgang Loerde's name.
Loerde was consumed by this the way almost anybody who gets involved with it does. It was a tremendous sensation. He got a lot of publicity and a lot of very good stories.
Over 15 editions, De Stern slowly unpicked the truth behind the mystery of Lake Toplitz. What Loerde had found was evidence of the biggest counterfeiting operation in history.
The idea of counterfeiting British pounds was actually conceived in the first week of the war.
The Nazis' plan was to destabilize the pound as the world's reserve currency and bring the British Empire to its knees. Great Britain would be subsumed into the 1,000-year Reich. The Bank of England was convinced its banknotes were unforgeable. But the German SS had other ideas. Its head, Heinrich Himmler, was in charge of the plan. And he had just the person to put it into practice. An SS officer with a background in engineering and a speciality in forging passports had come to Himmler's attention. His name was Bernhard Kruger. Himmler told Kruger he would even name the operation after him, Operation Bernhard. It was an offer Kruger couldn't refuse. Kruger was instructed by Himmler to use Jewish counterfeiters and artists to make his pounds. Many of them were already at the Nazis' disposal.
Kruger went to Auschwitz, saying, please have everybody, any one of your Jewish prisoners who speaks German and is connected with the graphic arts, just pull their names out and get them ready. And he assembled, over a period of about a year or two, 140 Jewish prisoners in the Sachsenhausen concentration camp just north of Berlin, which was actually the headquarters of all the concentration camps.
Kruger then had to decide which pound note was the easiest for his Sachsenhausen team to forge.
They decided to print 5-pound notes, big, impressive 5-pound notes, black and white notes, easy to print. This man was a very meticulous engineer by training, and he got plates that were sent by the Reichsbank's engravers, and they adjusted these plates with all of the special secret markings that the British put on the pounds.
They wanted to make really perfect pound notes. Those pound notes, of course, were part of their plans. They were supposed to be used for international finance.
Wolfgang Loeder's De Stern articles revealed that in September 1942, the first Sachsenhausen-produced forged pounds had made their way into circulation over the Channel. They were technically brilliant, almost undetectable. The Bank of England declared them the most dangerous forgeries they'd ever seen. Soon, a flood of forged pounds were appearing, used by the Nazis to buy weapons and yet more gold. The Nazi plan was working. Sterling began to lose value. But Himmler and the SS had bigger ideas.
They came up with this crazy idea that if they print millions of fake pounds and drop them over England, that the British economy would just blow up and collapse.
Himmler wanted Goering's Luftwaffe to airdrop the forgeries over Britain, rendering the pound worthless. They certainly had enough forgeries. Between 1942 and 1945, the Sachsenhausen counterfeiters produced 134 million fake pounds.
That represents roughly 13% of the billion pounds in circulation throughout the world.
The pound was becoming a suspect currency. Nobody knew which were real and which were the Führer's forgeries.
This was the greatest counterfeit in history. Captain Kruger, who was in charge of this, boasted quite correctly after the war, I am the greatest counterfeiter in history, which he was. There's nothing even near it.
But Himmler's idea of a huge airdrop was never realized. The Germans were losing the war. The Luftwaffe simply didn't have enough planes to put the idea into practice. As the Allies approached in 1945, Krüger knew his life and that of his counterfeiters had little meaning to his boss, Heinrich Himmler, who was desperately trying to hide evidence of his appalling crimes.
Krüger realized that not only when the thing was shut down that the Jews would get killed, but he, as the bearer of a state secret, probably would get killed too. So it was the interests of both the SS major and the Jews began to converge.
Krüger ordered his men to escape and burn all the evidence of his extraordinary counterfeiting operation. The trouble was, burning millions of pounds was more difficult than Krüger realized.
Why didn't they just destroy them? The point is, they did try to destroy a number of them. They had orders to burn them and leave not a trace of any pound in the ashes. And they buried the ashes.
But there were just too many pounds to destroy. So Krüger sent a unit with forgeries boxed in weighted, waterproof crates, each weighing 200 pounds, to the Salzkammergut. Their destination was Lake Toplitz, as proved by Wolfgang Loerder, who pulled them to the surface in 1959.
The intelligence service of the SS, in cahoots with high-level experts, brought the boxes to the Toplitz in Austria. I knew that the boxes were thrown into Toplitz, and I knew who threw them in.
Loerder revealed that the SS unit were told very specifically to attempt to find a way of retrieving the boxes after the war.
They take the coffins full of counterfeit pounds and they sink them in the lake, but not completely, because each one of those coffins is attached to a rope.
Und dann wurden diese Kisten. These boxes were tied up to wooden floats with a rope and thrown into the water.
Und ins Wasser geschmissen. Und ein Bild ist auch da.
And in one of the pictures, a little boy, my son, is pulling the float with a rope attached to it.
The ropes from the boxes were attached to logs that would float and indicate where they had been sunk. That way, the SS believed they would one day return and reclaim their sunken loot. Once Loerder had discovered the truth, the Austrian government, on instructions from the Bank of England, destroyed Krüger's pounds. But such was the scale of the counterfeiting operation. Today, there are almost 3 times more counterfeits than originals left in existence.
To me, the profound irony of the pounds is that the real fakes, and there are some fake fakes actually, that is people trying to cash in on it, the real fakes which fetch 10s, 20s, 30s, 50 pounds, far more valuable than their face value, sometimes 100 pounds if they're good ones in good condition.
But had Wolfgang Loerder unraveled the mystery of Lake Toplitz once and for all? Were the stories of sunken gold just stories after all? Questions remained. If Toplitz only contained forged pounds, what was in the heavier boxes as seen by Ida Weisenbacher. That day the SS arrived at her door. Could they have contained gold?
Bestimmt. Absolutely, absolutely. All these boxes haven't been taken out. I'm convinced. There were these small, heavy boxes with the handles. I don't know, but maybe there was gold in there. The gold must be really deep down.
It's not such a far-fetched idea. Even the man who found the forged pounds in Lake Toplitz is convinced another unit of SS officers were responsible for the disposal of Nazi gold.
There was a different group that transported boxes with gold to Austria. There are probably gold boxes down there. They're still there. The place can still be found today. I can even show you on a photo.
Loerder's convinced this photograph, taken by a naval officer at the time, shows pounds being thrown into the lake in the foreground, but gold being sunk in the back. The rumors of sunken gold remain so strong that in 1963, 4 years after de Stern's revelations, a young diver from Munich drowned looking for it. Whilst searching for the body, the Austrian government mounted the first official exploration of the lake. They pulled to the surface equipment from Sachsenhausen and yet more counterfeit pounds, but no gold. After that, the authorities introduced a ban on all underwater explorations of Toplitz, which still exists today. But that didn't stop one man, Gerhard Zauner, who as a boy had witnessed Wolfgang Loerder raising the forged pounds from the depths all those years ago.
It is my world. It is my favorite lake because historically it's the hottest.
Zauner has dived for gold and other treasures more times than anyone else in the Salzkammergut. He's pulled so much Nazi memorabilia from the bottom of the Austrian lakes, he's even opened his own museum.
We've had bayonets, rifles, handguns, hypodermic needles, 3 big round mines. One of them is in the restaurant at Toplitz.
But Zauner never discovered gold until 1987. On the 1st of April, Zauner pulled from the depths 14 perfectly preserved gold bars. Gerhard Zauner, the local dive enthusiast, had raised the Nazi gold. Finally, someone had found it. But all was not as it seemed.
We had a very unpleasant policeman who examined my car's tires. They were worn out. He made me pay the maximum fine. But he was actually right. And we thought we were going to do a prank on him. So we had gold bars made and we sank them.
It was all just an April Fool's joke by Zauner to get back at his local policeman.
We said it wasn't gold, but the police said it was, as it was heavy. They took it away, and after 3 days they found out it wasn't gold after all. No one knows the policeman's real name now. Everyone just calls him Goldfinger.
Even today, Zauner's hoax hasn't stopped the stories of Nazi gold in Lake Toplitz from persisting.
There are so many funny stories the Austrians tell about it, because they say there's all these nutty Americans and British coming to Lake Toplitz, and we're just making jokes with them.
Any story that says, look, there's gold in them thar hills or them thar lakes, is going to attract people who'll say, let me go after it and look for it. Because after all, if you find it, you've hit the jackpot.
The mystery of what really lies at the bottom of the devil's dustbin may never be solved.
Today, Toplitz is a bit of a secret. It doesn't want to show all it's got, does it?
One thing is for sure, there's large amounts of gold and other valuables in the Salzkammergut that have not been found.